Good morning, everyone. Hello, welcome. Thank you for sharing this time with us. We'd like to welcome you today to this webcast on optimizing the cost and better management of your Office 365 licenses. And we thank you for taking this time with us. And if you've signed up, you'll of course have access to a recording of this after we're done. So without further ado, to cover this, we've got with us our product expert, Sonia Bunarjan.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. So this is me. So I've been working at Ytria for a while now, and my specialty is in this tool called sapio365, which I'll be showing you. And it's going to be, today's session is going to be all about license management, as promised. Now, we're not going to be looking at any how to, make at the best practices of how to manage your licenses in terms of policies and everything. But when you have your policies in place, you want to make sure that they are being applied properly, that everything is working according to those policies. So that's what we're going to be looking at, and at certain aspects of them. So this is the agenda for today. So we'll start off by looking at unassigned licenses, basically licenses that you've purchased but that haven't been assigned to anyone. Secondly, we'll look at wrongfully assigned licenses, or as we like to call it, licenses that are assigned to people who can't even use them because, for some reason or other, they've been blocked from accessing Microsoft 365. Maybe they left the company, something like that. Next, some companies, maybe yours, use groups in order to assign licenses to the members of those groups, and it's a very interesting way of controlling license assignment. So we'll look at that. We'll look at how to get a global view of that, and also how to manage it. And fourth position, we've got underutilized licenses. So what does this mean? This means users basically who are inactive and who have licenses assigned. These licenses could be basically, you can analyze why is it that these people are inactive. Is it possible that their account is no longer active in the organization, or is it because they don't know how to use particular services? So it's a great way to audit a kind of the usage of services within your organization by your staff in order to make sure that adoption of Microsoft 365 services is going as planned. And then lastly, we'll look at how to delegate license management, and not just delegating the capability of removing or assigning licenses, but also limiting the scope of that action. You just want to delegate to a user the ability to assign licenses to a specific type of people. And you want to make sure that they don't surpass a specific number of licenses that they allocate. So we'll look at all this. And so in the first part, unassigned licenses. So how many of my purchased licenses are just laying around? Okay. So now what you see is sapio365. And if we're talking about licenses and the global view of licenses, we'll look at the tenant level over here in this section. Just by getting this information, we have a view of what we have in the tenant here, including the licenses and how many are consumed, how many are enabled or purchased, right? And if they have any warnings or anything like that. You also have a view with service plans. So for instance, let's just open these up. So under each license, you've got all the service plans and their relative health over here. And you see this pink column over here. This is a column that I created. And this column is basically a calculated column that I created from enabled or purchased, minus consumed, and minus suspended, and minus warning, which brings me the number of available licenses I have in my tenant. So this is the answer to the question, how many purchase licenses are just lying around? And a very easy way to get a visual representation is to create a chart of this. Now, in this section here, we have various tools to manipulate all the data that you see here, including chart creation. Well, it so happens that we have a ready-made job that does all this. And it even lets me it allows me to pick the licenses I'm interested in, because for instance, like this Microsoft Free Flow with the 10,000, it's going to skew my chart. You know, I won't be able to see anything else, so I just won't pick it. And just with one click, I can get a chart of a relative view of what I have purchased and what has been consumed. And I can even rebuild it. So for instance, change my data setup. It looks similar to Excel. This is just in addition to everything else that sapio365 can do. So for instance, I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to add the available so that we can look at what has been consumed, what has been assigned in red to users, and what is still available for assignment. This was an example of the kind of quick access to information you can get. And these automated jobs can be scheduled to run recurrently. So they can just run during off hours even, and send you an email with that chart as an attachment, as an image attachment, so that you're always kept informed as to what's happening in your environment. Another interesting situation here is, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a -1 in here. There may be an issue. So what we can do is from here, just by selecting this specific license, we can find all the users that have this license assigned and maybe figure out what's happening here. Why is there a -1 situation? So just by clicking this, it's going to get all the users, and it's doing all this job of using filters and sorting in order to keep only the users we're interested in. So now what you see in front of you is a list of all the users that have that license. As you can see, it's each user, and beneath the user, you'll have the licenses. And the license that we were looking at was the Enterprise Mobility and Security E5. You know, at this point, what I want to see is I want to see a property that lets me know what is the status. So there's a property over here, the license status, you can see here. And I was looking for this specific property. So what I can do is I drag the title of this property up here in order to find the specific one that's kind of not working properly. So it seems that this account, the support, which I know is a shared mailbox, has this license assigned, but there's some issue. So this will allow you to either dig in further, you know, within your own environment in your admin portal, or you can just take action here very quickly, because if you know that this is a shared mailbox, it doesn't need any license really. So what we'll do is we'll just select it and edit the license and simply remove it this way. Now this action, any action in sapio365, like deletion of an unassignment of a license or an addition of a license, is done in a two-step approach, meaning that we show you what's going to happen in the grid, in the status column over here, before you actually save it. So next, we're going to look at wrongfully assigned licenses. So licenses that have been assigned to people, but they can't even use them because they're blocked from signing into sapio365. Since we need to see who's actually blocked in our tenant, we'll open up our users view. And what you see here is the full list of users, including guests. So what we can do is filter out our guests, since they have nothing to do with licensing. So now we have all the list of our members. Now remember that I only have here 75 members. You will definitely have much more. You know, this is a demo environment. And when you load this information, when sapio365 retrieves this information from your tenant, it all depends on your connection and also on the volume, on the sheer volume of users. But once you make that first load, it's all cached locally on your machine, as you can see in this corner over here. So you can actually work with a cache and just, you can make sure that the cache is always up to date so that whenever you do need to work on it, you don't have to wait as long. But even retrieving the entirety of your tenant in terms of the list of users, it's not that long. It's not that long. Anyway, so what we have here is a list of our users, and on the top you can see the properties of these users, including the sign-in status and the state of their license assignment. So already you can see visually which ones are blocked, which ones have some licenses assigned. But if you have a large volume, and which I'm sure you definitely do, it'll be much easier to use some filters or some groupings. So what we'll do is we'll take our sign-in status over here, the title of this column, and we'll drag it to the left. And we've grouped all our entries this way, so that we can focus only on our blocked users. Now what we see right away is that several of them have licenses assigned, right? And at this point, what we can do is just select them or use further filtering to remove the unlicensed if you want to deal only with those that are that have licenses assigned. And manage their licenses. You cannot manage it in this view because there's just so much information here. And as I'll show you, the view to manage licenses is much more convenient because it also includes the service plans, which you can also disable or enable. So for these 4 users, let's look at their licenses. The license situation. So as you see here, you have the same users and you have their licenses involved. Now I want to make a distinction here because I can, let's say, select all the users and remove everything. But then you can do the same thing in the portal, right? But what you can't do in the portal is remove a specific license. For instance, if I just want to remove the E5s or the E5s and the security E5s. So what I'll do is I selected all my users and I edit them. And as you can see, this gives me a nice view of what's actually available and the status, the commonalities of my selection. So if I want to just remove this one, I will make sure I will put this as an X and this one as well. And when I apply it, it's going to send that change into my grid only. So again, remember that every changes you make in sapio365 is a two-step approach. First shows you in the grid, and then you can save it when you're happy with your decision. So this allows you a kind of pick and choose kind of thing when you're managing licenses. And I just remember there was that the question regarding license location, right? Right. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's a column here with the country. And you can make sure that these two correspond together. And if they don't, you can certainly change the license location using this button over here. So it's very handy, let's say, for onboarding purposes, right? So if you're onboarding several users from various countries, sure, okay, you can assign the same licenses to them, but they will all have to have different usage locations, and that is not feasible to do using the native tools. So what you can do is, let's say, filter only your, keep only your unlicensed users, the new ones anyway, to make things simpler. And then use the country as a grouping. Okay. And then what you can do is make sure you can either select them all and manage them in the window that we saw before, where the licenses are, or you can just take blocks, because as you can see here, if I scroll down here, okay, everything seems to be okay, actually, for Canada. And if those that are on set, well, you can just get these licenses and fix them as I showed you before. Right? So before you even assign licenses, you can set their usage location. So we'll look for Canada. We'll apply, and we'll save. Okay, oh, well, these are service accounts, so was not a good example. Anyway, so that was a question, that was the answer to the question that was asked. Basically, you can group your users by their country and then manage them in batches. That's what I would do anyway. So coming back to our questions, so group licensing. Group licensing, I don't know if you've noticed, when I showed you the list of users, for example, over here. So we're back to our list of users where we were before. And in terms of group licensing, I'm just going to clear the filter so we have everything. There is a property here that shows you when a user has some licenses assigned via a group. So this is all in good. This is all very good, but it doesn't really give you the entirety. The question is, like, which groups are actually being used for license assignment? This is more an answer to the second question, who's got licenses assigned via the group? So in the first case, if we need to find all the groups that are being used for license assignment, we'll need to go back to our main view over here and get a list of our groups. So we're loading up our groups, and then we can change to a view that shows us that it basically adds this columns that are called assigned license SKU part numbers and assigned licenses. And then what we can do is filter out the no assignments. Okay, so now you have a list of your groups that are being used for group licensing. So how do you manage these? Well, very easily, right? Because in any case, you need to add or remove members to make sure these people have licenses assigned. So I'll select both, and I'll come up here and I'll request the members of these groups. So at this point, I can remove people. You know, for instance, these conference rooms shouldn't be here at all. So I'll just remove them. And maybe there are some new people that I should add to both. So I'll add new members. I'll load my full directory and add the new person, for instance, or several. And you can see here in the status column, it's going to show what the action, what the change is going to be before I actually implement it in the server. Okay, so that's for group license management. And if you use a mix of both direct assignments and group licensing assignments, and then sapio365 can help you a lot, because you can see right away which users are affected by groups. And so you can start by removing them from those groups first before you try to remove them directly, which will end up in an error anyway, just like in the portal, you know. But of course, here the beauty is you can do it on a much bigger scale, and you can control which licenses you're removing or adding, and have a much better a global view of everything that you're doing, you know, and in a very safe way as well. Then finally, underutilized licenses. Basically, who has licenses with services that assigned but hasn't used them in the past month or so. So we're talking here about usage reports. And you do have access to usage reports in the portal. And these usage reports are the same ones we use in sapio365, but with some nice major enhancements, actually. So if we come here to this level of the tenant, we have our usage reports. If we launch this, you have the list of the usage reports. And if we're going to be talking about license utilization, then we need to know Microsoft 365 active users. However, beyond the usage reports that are available in the portal, what you can do here is you can actually combine usage reports. So you combine all that information from those reports, and sapio365 merges the common denominators, basically the users themselves, to show you everything in one place. So in this case, I'm looking at OneDrive usage, email activity, and general Microsoft 365 active users, just to show you. Besides that, we also have additional information. For instance, a very interesting one is department. Now, if you're auditing usage to make sure that adoption of Microsoft 365 services is going properly, you may want to add department here or even office in order to plan any trainings, that are geared specifically towards one group of people or another. So once I launch this, now in my environment, I don't have many people and I don't have much activity, so this is why it went so fast. But in yours, depending on what the time range that you choose, it may take a bit of time. It all depends on volume handling and everything. So what we have here is our list of users. And if we scroll here at the bottom towards the right, you'll notice that there is OneDrive usage, the block of OneDrive usage information. So it's the same report that you have. You have email activity, and you have Microsoft 365 active users, which is really interesting in itself because it lets you, it shows you what, like a general idea of what was the last activity that was used, the last service that was used, and when. So this is a very interesting value. And what we'll do is we'll take this last activity date and we will drag it to group our users by this. Okay, but you see this is not very conducive to any kind of analysis. So what we'll do is we'll format this, this grouping, and we'll make it a more friendly kind of long format kind of way. So what this shows you that you have some users that are in each of these type of category, and it will let you know, for instance, you have users who've probably never used the services in Microsoft 365, and even some of them have licenses. And over a year even is quite a lot. So you can figure out, you can understand, you can try to understand, are these users not using these services because they're no longer in the company, or is it because they need training?
Sonia?
Yes.
Off the top of my head, but is this a way of tracking adoption?
Yes. So if they don't know how to use a particular, if they're not using a particular service, it's possible that it's because they don't know how or they're not comfortable in using it. So you'll have a much better idea. I could easily have done the OneDrive usage at last activity date to give me that idea, in terms of the licenses that are given to these people, and they're not even using OneDrive. So you can plan some trainings geared specifically for OneDrive usage. So now at this point, right, say that you have some of these users, they have left the company, but for some reason or other they were not blocked, or they they just fell through the cracks in a way, but you recognize them by examining this. You recognize that these people should not have licenses and they should be totally blocked, first of all. So what we can do is remove them. But, well, we'll select them, for instance, these 3 people as an example, and we'll get to, well, either if I want to block them, I can go here into the user details and then edit them from there, block it. Or, and then I can go to their licenses straight from the reports and edit the licenses. So as you can see, it's like a tapestry of all these different views that you have, all linked together by the relationships. And right now I'm showing you just licenses, but there's much, much more. You have mail, you have OneDrive files, calendars, a whole lot. Yeah, so here we'll just delete those and then save. I'm happy. And if I want to go back, I can. I don't want to go back to my report here. All right, so we have our last question here. All right, so the fifth case, the last case, is about delegation. And delegation is really important, especially in large organizations, right? Because it takes a lot of pressure off the IT team. And when we're talking about delegating with sapio365, we're talking about delegating it to people who are non-IT, who don't have any role to play in Microsoft 365, who haven't been assigned any directory roles, you know? So in our case over here, we're going to task Lee. Well, we've already created a role for him. So Lee, he's allowed to assign a maximum number of licenses, and only, let's say, within the marketing department. This is, let's say, this is the case, just to show you how granular delegation can be in terms of license management and everything else, of course. Okay, so I'm back here. And in the main window over here, you'll notice that this is what I'm signed in as the administrator. And next to it, I have a list of recent sessions because I switch between various tenants, between various users to test, to try to figure out what customers like you need and how to best find the solution for that. So here, I have Lee. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly switch to Lee. So here's Lee with a session. And Lee, he's not an administrator or anything. He basically, if he uses sapio365, he can see a list of users. He can see the groups. Basically the same thing. Whatever he can do in Microsoft 365, he can do in sapio365. And what's cool is that he can actually even see his own personal stuff. Messages, OneDrive files, you know, a different way of looking at what you have. And so what we did is we gave Lee a role. And Lee, when he signs into sapio365, he can choose that role. So he has several roles here. He has a role of a global admin on a totally different tenant. Now, this is when we're talking about MSP situations, right? And what we're looking at, the role specific to our situation here, is this one. So this is a role I created. So Lee chooses it, and now it's applied. All right, you can see here what's written. If Lee wants to know the details of the role, we'll just clicks on the role info. And basically, what this says is that everything that Lee does with this role is going to be logged. So it's pretty good for auditing too, in terms of delegation with sapio365. The permissions that Lee has using sapio365 is the additional licenses and group member additions, you know, when we're talking about group licensing, if that's the case, you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but I just wanted to include both type of cases. And next, this section over here, the scopes. So what this means is we don't want Lee to be able to assign or remove licenses for everybody. We just want him to do it for people who have their department set as marketing. And also, we only want him to manage the group members of groups that are being used for licensing. And in my tenant, my groups, I've basically used the display name that starts with this term. So I'm using this as a criteria to make to create the scope for Lee. Okay, and as we go further down, you'll see the list of licenses that are in this tenant, and what you'll see is that the admin itself has set a maximum of 7 for this specific license. Okay. And all the other licenses are at 0. Basically, Lee can't touch the others. He cannot assign or remove any of the other licenses. He can only work with this type and only 7 of them. He can assign only 7 of them maximum. So this whole point is to allow departments to have a kind of controlled budget in terms of the licenses that they're allowed to use. So budgets can be set for a specific number of licenses, and that doesn't necessarily mean they need to use them all, but at least there's a maximum that's set. So it's much easier in terms of allocation for departments, as an example. So now that we looked at all this info, let's actually see what Lee can do. And this is basically everything that I showed you all previously, Lee can do, except you'll see here that Lee can only see these users because they are the ones that are in this marketing department. And you can make the scope as intricate as you want. You can include, let's say, marketing and sales, or something else, or use any of these properties as a criteria for the scope. That's a totally different session, and so sometime in the future, I'll show you how to work with the role-based access control in sapio365. So Lee at this point can take care of all these, right? And if we're looking at the flow free and he's only allowed to assign, for instance, he can just look, let's say you added some new users, right? And he can only assign this specific license, the flow free one, with this role. So what he can do is select the new users. And as you see here, everything is pretty much closed except the licenses and the group memberships. And here too, he can't even edit any of these users because that's not part of his role. And so what we'll do is we'll just click on the licenses to get the licenses of those users. And since they're new, there's nothing assigned. And assign those licenses. And you'll notice, because of the limitations we've put here, these are not available. It's all 0, 0. So he can only assign this one. And even that, you have the availability, like how many are still available to assign. Because we've set our maximum to 7. And we already have 4 in the marketing department that have been assigned this. Yes?
We have a question. So could you go back and show this again? Someone's asking if there's a way to see what a delegate has done with the role that was assigned to them. So can we see where it shows that what Lee is doing is being logged?
Oh, right. Is there a way to see what a delegate has done with a role that was assigned? All right, I will show that. I will show that after. But before I go into that, I just want to show something else here. And this is, you'll notice that we've got these group licensing, right? So he can control these as well. And if I look at the membership of these people, for instance, or I'll just leave this one person. Okay. And what I can do is I can add him to another licensing group, because these users are within my scope of marketing, right? And when I load the full directory, I only see the groups that are within my scope, within my custom role. So I can assign this one as well and save it. Now, going back to the question about the usage, like how do we see what a person with a role-based session has done? Anything anybody does in sapio365 is recorded, but especially so when they're in role-based session. So what the administrator will have to switch back to the administrator now in order to see this information. So I'm back as an administrator, and I go back here, and I go into the user activity logs. So here I have all the logs from this computer, but if I have a more collaborative kind of setup, then I can see everything, right? But just for this demonstration purposes, we'll just look at that. So what I'll do is I'll just do by username. So if I'm going to audit sapio365 users, what have they been up to? So you can see the name of the role themselves, if they have roles. If they've been using sapio365 without a role, you'll see them here. So you can see what they've been doing, the updates and anything else, the type of actions. I'll just do a double kind of double thing. So you'll see here that I've done a sub categorization, basically. You can look at it this way. So it's very easy to audit. To wrap things up, I just wanted to summarize what you've seen here. I mean, I showed you everything in context of license management, but you saw that it's beyond that. You saw that sapio365 is beyond that. You basically see everything, and you get access to everything. As an administrator, it's very important to have all this in one place. Next, you also have the automation that's available. So everything in sapio365 can be automated. We've created a whole bunch of reports and actionable kind of actions in our jobs, automation jobs that you can use, or you can create your own. You also have the ability to manage hybrid accounts as well. So if you have a hybrid tenant, for instance, you have some accounts that are synchronizing from your local AD. sapio365 allows you not only to change to update the properties in the cloud, but you can also update the properties in the local AD as well, because obviously if it's going to synchronize from to the cloud, that's where you have to do it, right? And in terms of collaboration, it's all very easy to do. The setup is the centralization of the information is done in Cosmos DB in your own Azure, so you have control over everything. And sapio365 is quite modular, so if you're not a hybrid, then you don't need to get the extra parts. You know, if you're small, you don't need collaboration, you don't need to do that either. You know, customized reports, that's what it's all about, but they're also actionable reports, and everything is quite secure. As I said before, we have no access whatsoever to any of the information that you see in sapio365 that's on your tenant. Nothing goes through Ytria servers. So basically, it allows you a very effective way to manage your tenants. You know, and licensing is a direct way of saving money, really. But imagine all the time that you're saving, and that's a very significant cost savings as well. And of course, sapio365, we keep adding new features because our customers demand it, of course. And, you know, everybody's environment in Microsoft changes, it becomes more complex. Office 365 admins need more and more control over their environment. So this is where we're working with our customers to help them, you know, save time and money. And I want to thank you all for being here today. And if you ever have any questions, you know, feel free to send us information to contact us. That's it for me today. Thank you so much.